Welcome to the Permanent Podcast. This is a mini season on diligence. Tim, why are we talking about diligence?
Diligence is a huge part of any investment firm's investment process, but it's shrouded in secrecy, and we just wanted to demystify it.
So we've open sourced our diligence process here at Permanent Equity. Let's diligence confidently. The three of us had a conversation earlier this year, and we don't want to date this podcast, but it was called How to Sell a Business in 2023. Emily, in that conversation, you said, look, if a seller wants to think about selling their business, the first step is just to reach out and start a conversation. Well, today, I want to talk about what happens after that conversation.
That's great.
I've been trying out some titles. You want to hear a couple title ideas?
Sure.
You're really vibing today.
What does that even mean?
I'm not sure, but it seemed appropriate to say.
It's what the kids say. It's a vibe. It's a vibe.
Claire calls things legendary now. I didn't know that was a...
Legend.
Ooh.
That's a thing.
Naya says stuff is sick.
Sick. With a Q. S-I-Q.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right, a couple titles. Just want to see which one feels right in the room. You ready? From first call to final close, the process of building the deal.
Oh, jeez.
Huh? The 7 stages of diligence. Shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, acceptance of the deal.
Call the close, really. I liked that. Call the close.
Just want to go to that one. Keep it simple.
Call the close.
Okay, today we're talking
drama
about
escalation in this is like a little
In a world.
In a world. Okay, so today we're going to talk about what happens next from the first call to final close.
Yep.
What does happen next?
Typically, we have an initial conversation just to see if we can be helpful. That conversation generally centers around what are you trying to accomplish? Some people aren't looking to sell, but they are looking for capital. We are an investor that's associated with control-oriented investing. So we're buying somewhere between 51 and 100%. So if somebody's just looking for capital, like we're not going to be the right fit. So there's a quick conversation just to make sure that we can be helpful. And if we can't, we try to help them find other people who may be able to help them out. After we get past that point, then we're really trying to understand the nuances of both the situation and the business. And so that's a series of conversations. Like it can start with them explaining everything in the first call, but a lot of people want to sign an NDA first and then want to, sort of have a sequential process to making sure that they're not revealing too much too early and that we are doing what we said we would do. That goes back and forth. And honestly, like we ask a lot of dumb questions during that period of time.
And good questions.
Just making sure that we do understand exactly what they do, how they do it, who's involved. And then we get to a point where we say, we have sincere interest. Usually at that point, we try to confirm that they are also interested in our model and our version of success, right? So that can take place in a variety of different ways, but the main question is the magic wand question. After the transaction closes, if you could wave a magic wand, what do things look like? And we want to hear their version of what that vision looks like and make sure that it aligns with ours. Because we don't want a partner who's going to be disappointed with us 2 or 5 years down the line, especially when we're trying to set things up for a decades-long partnership. So that all culminates with, okay, do we have a shared vision of the future? And if we do, then we say we're ready to make an offer. So at that point, we put forth an IOI.
Can I admit something?
Sure.
I don't know what an IOI stands for.
It's an indication of interest. It sounds very official. We write a letter, like that's all it is. We write you a letter, and in the letter, we articulate what we had just talked about, right? So what do we see the future looking like? And what did you express is important to you about how that future looks? Accompanying that is how we see the transaction going forward. What we're trying to settle on at that point are what is the enterprise value going to be? How much of the business are we buying? And any like material components that may be obstacles in our ability to move forward or are things that we would want to solve before close.
When do site visits happen in this process? Have we already done a site visit by the time we're issuing an IOI?
Typically not, because typically you want to make sure that you're in the same ballpark at least before both sides start spending money traveling and digging into things further.
Yep.
Oh, and even time more than money, right? I mean, yeah.
You brought up something about whether or not our model's a good fit. When you say that, are you talking about Permanent Equity's model and approach in investing in companies and stewarding companies as a whole? Or are you saying our model for this business specifically?
It's usually a combination of both. So some businesses are seeking investment because they have a specific goal that they're looking to achieve. Some are doing so with just aspirations of what is referred to as like the next level. Rarely can that be fully defined, right? And it's sort of, they're looking to outside parties to say, this is what the next level could look like, right? Our model of stewardship, again, is structured to steward a company throughout cycles, throughout ups and downs, among multiple managers, right? Over time, 30 years is a long time, right? So with that in mind, we're much more focused on the structural components of the business and how systemically healthy it is. And then thinking about, when times are right, when the people are ready, what are the things that we're going to work to achieve together? Sometimes that's a really good fit for an organization, and sometimes it's a really good fit for a seller. And some sellers honestly want to be told what to do, and they want to be in a sprint for 3 to 5 years and then for it to all be over, right? That is not what we offer. So what we mean by that is, yes, it's structurally related to our model, but it's also specific to the company in that the ways in which we think about growth have to align with the ways that they're thinking about growth in order for us to be the right fit.
So we've had the conversations, we've gathered the information, we've issued an IOI. What's next? Step 3, maybe.
There is usually back and forth after the IOI is received because we're making assumptions about what we think the best path forward looks like. And we don't have a template or boilerplate versions of what we put forth. So we will decide based on what we've heard, how much of the company that we think we should buy and how much somebody should roll forward. We will think about cash consideration and how that is best structured for them to have the best upside, but also solve for liquidity needs or wants that they have in the immediate term. All of that can be somewhat of a negotiation just to make sure that we understood properly, that if there are priorities that they didn't articulate previously, that we get through those. But if we get to a point where we do agree on terms, that's when we're going on the site visit.
What's a site visit look like?
A site visit has a couple of components to it. One, you're getting boots on the ground to try to verify that what you've learned through the information gathering and the financial modeling and all the things that we've done to date are actually true. So, if somebody said, hey, we've got a really great, impressive factory, ideally they actually do have an impressive factory and they're not dumping, waste out the back door, which we've seen.
Or there's black mold in the corner.
Right, exactly. So that's one piece. It's confirmatory, to make sure that we're willing to keep spending time and money and going on to the next step. The other piece is relationship building. We typically want to have a great meal together. We want to start getting to know the different key players. We'd love to get to know as much of the management team that we'll be working with as we can. Now, obviously, there are considerations where a seller might not want to go full open kimono and tell the whole business that, hey, these are the prospective buyers coming in. But if we can meet more than 1 or 2 people, that's ideal. Because to Emily's point, our model is a 27-year model. It's effectively permanent capital. I mean, you want to like the people you work with, right? You're going to spend as much time with them as you spend with your own family. And you certainly wouldn't marry someone without going on a site visit, right? So to speak. So
it's also helpful for those people to be able to ask questions because typically this is the first opportunity that they've had to be involved in talking to a buyer. We like giving them the floor to ask questions directly and make sure that we're forming relationships, not just with the person doing the transaction, but with, to Tim's point, anyone we're going to be working with.
Yeah, it's meant to be a two-way street. And there's usually, like I said, a business component and then a social relationship building component. I think we're going on a site visit here shortly where we might play pickleball, right? And that doesn't seem like a super business-oriented activity, but I think it's going to be a really valuable use of time.
Emily, you're going to play pickleball.
Well, that's actually debatable. I have tried to think about how I can be a good sport. I don't typically play sports in a professional setting because I'm not the most professional in that type of environment. But we'll see.
Are you saying because you can't hit the ball back over the net or because you're going to lose your cool and choose someone out?
Can it be both?
I'm going to drop an F-bomb when I don't hit the ball back over the net.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
That's what I mean.
Let's keep you off the court on the site visit.
We won't relationship build with Emily.
No.
Pickleball. We'll have a shared experience. We might make a memory.
Okay, so site visit is after the IOI. Mm-hmm. We're heading towards the one I do know of, which is LOI.
Letter of intent.
Yes.
So the point of a site visit is like, this is your opportunity to have a live date to get to know each other. After that, there may be additional questions and back and forth. But then the question is, are we committing to each other or not? Up until that point, typically as a seller, you're welcome to talk to whomever you want to about options. And you are welcome to back out and just say, I don't think I want to do this. It can be all exploration up and through the site visit. Although we hope that the point of the site visit is to decide whether you're ready to make that commitment. After that, though, the letter of intent is still non-binding, but it is a legal document. And the point of it is to say we are committing to each other. In that, it's known as the exclusivity period, but you are committing that you're not talking to anyone else during that period, and that we intend to go through diligence and work towards closing a deal together.
Under specific terms that are laid out in the letter of intent. So the letter of intent gets more specific than the IOI.
And at that point, those are the terms that we intend to close with unless new information presents itself, right? So the intent is that those are the terms that will be reflected in the purchase agreement.
All right, so to recap, we have step 1, which is the initial fact-finding conversations.
Yep.
Step 2 is the IOI. Step 3 will be a site visit, continued conversations throughout this whole process, of course. Mm-hmm. Step 4 is the LOI. Mm-hmm. What's next? Step 5.
The lovely act of diligence.
We talk a little bit about that on our website.
Yes, now we do.
Yeah.
We've avoided it for a while.
Okay, so diligence is going to be a process that we actually have a whole bunch of resources built out on, and you can go there, permanentequity.com/diligence. It'll be linked in the show notes here too. It might even be where you are right now listening to this. But if you just wanted to summarize the diligence process.
The process exists for us to confirm that what we think to be true about the assumptions underlying our offer are actually true. Said another way, during the information gathering process, we've not only had discussions about what you're trying to accomplish and so on and so forth, but we've probably also asked for, high-level financials, some key documents, maybe around partnership agreements, depending on the type of business it is, information about your customers and suppliers. And then during diligence, we're typically going to ask for, not just the high-level financials, but the entire general ledger. So it's like going fully into the primary documents that generate the things we've seen to date and making sure that, again, everything that we've assumed to be true is true. And if it turns out to be true, then to Emily's point, we can close the deal under the specific terms that are laid out in the letter of intent. If something that you told us was true turns out not to be true, for example, people will often say, hey, yeah, I get paid in 30 days. And then we actually see, the AR aging schedules and the bank account statements, and that's not true. That may be something where we go back and say, hey, we have to move a little bit on valuation because this business doesn't generate as much cash as you said it did. With regards to, we'll hear people say, oh yeah, I've got no liabilities in the past, but we'll ask for, all claims that you might have had, employee claims, insurance claims, things of that nature. And you'll find that there is typically more residual messiness than is often laid out in those initial conversations. And that's just something to work through. I mean, we're in the investing business and we buy equity, right? Which is typically the riskiest part of a capital stack. We know we're in the business taking risk, but we want to be able to take risk confidently. And that's what diligence helps us do.
Okay, we go through the messiness of diligence. How long should diligence take?
So the exploratory part of diligence typically is going to take somewhere between 30 and 60 days in a business that is well documented and knows where all the primary documents, to use Tim's language, are. Sometimes it can take a lot longer, and that can be if there are things that are missing, are not documented, or something else is messy about the business, right? That's just a process of information gathering at a whole different level. And depending on the history of the business, how long it's been in business, how complex their agreements are, it can take a while. But our intent is that we don't want it to take longer than it needs to. We're just trying to make sure that we do understand the nuances within the operations.
And some elements of diligence can be out of the hands of both the buyer and the seller. For example, you might need to notify a landlord and they have 60 days to approve, right? If that doesn't happen on day one, it happens 30 days into the process. Well, now you're automatically looking at a 90-day process because unless you can somehow cajole the landlord into being more responsive, their assignment agreements, all sorts of things that might need to happen in order for everything to be buttoned up for closing day.
And then you got to think about payroll. And there's a bunch of stuff that all has to factor into when you actually close. But there is a transition that takes place during the period of diligence, which is kind of transitioning away from exploring the business and getting, the confirmation that you need from those primary documents and moving towards the combination of drafting of legal documents and also structuring things to close. And so that's when you're thinking about customer assignments. That's when you're thinking about changing banking accounts, making sure insurance is set up properly, payroll, all of that type of stuff. But then alongside that, you're dealing with drafting. And so that's when both legal teams are starting to work together on both the purchase agreement and for someone who's rolling forward on an operating agreement and any associated employment agreements. So all of that legal documentation and the legal deal that you're structuring takes place during that period.
So we're working towards the purchase agreement. And then I heard Taylor, our chief legal officer, mention the closing checklist. That is built out, which is I think what you were describing.
That is
built out during diligence.
Yeah, that's the list of things that have to be structurally changed or modified in some way
transfer,
before we can close.
Like Purchase agreement sounds easy. You've already built the deal. Let's sign. Mm-hmm. Lawyers are involved. They never cause any delays or problems.
Never.
Yeah.
So we're done.
Mm-hmm. It's just that easy. No, I mean, there are lots of little things that come up in the purchase agreement. And most of it is, from our point of view, a business deal that we have been working on for a period of months up until that point is now reflected in legal language. And anyone who's ever worked with a lawyer knows that every lawyer has preferences when it comes to legal language. And at that point, you're seeing two sides who are each working for a different party have perspectives on that, right? So there is going to be some back and forth, but usually we're pretty fortunate to work with attorneys on both sides that know what the ultimate objective is. And that is, at that point, we're spending money on both sides because we want to close, because we want to do the business deal. And as long as everybody keeps that goal in mind, it doesn't have to be all that painful.
At the end of the day, you can have a business deal, but there are a lot of assumptions underpinning it that need to be defined. So, for example, you might have in an employment agreement, if something happens for cause. And in the business deal, it's like, oh yeah, for cause. If for cause, we'll do this and this, right? And then the lawyer say, well, what is cause?
Yes.
And then that needs to get ironed out and hammered out and defined, because if you don't define that term, and then you guys have different understandings of cause, when somebody does something for cause in the future, now you've got a lawsuit on your hands, right? If it's not very clearly defined. So, I think it's going through, and I think our team, Taylor in particular, does a great job of unpacking the business deal, kind of breaking it down into its constituent parts, and then defining each of those elements so that going forward, everything's really, really clear.
If you could be honest on this podcast, and maybe you don't want to say it and we'll delete it, but is this typically a point in the process where things get maybe a little sticky? Maybe the deal looks like it could be dying?
I was going to say, it usually depends on how aggressive the lawyers get about lawyering relative to understanding the business deal and making sure the business deal gets done. So like anyone, legal people can be performative and also get bogged down in details. But if the seller and the buyer are able to work with their legal and say, hey, meet in the middle, usually that stuff gets ironed out. But there is typically, in my experience, 1, 2, 3 kind of very sticky definitions and things that were, the big issue is mutually understood, but the devil is always in the details in some cases.
And I think to that point, it's usually that each side has 2 to 3 things that are priorities for them. And the real issue is if you are on opposite sides of an issue and it's a priority for both of you, right? That's when you're really going to have conflict. We don't have that very often. Actually, like to this whole conversation, we typically only go under letter of intent if we're confident that we understand the business, that we like the people, and that we think we could steward the business well. So if we go under a letter of intent and sign up for exclusivity, we want to close the deal. That is our intent. And then during diligence, we're not looking to retrade the deal. Like we're not intentionally going in looking for things that we're trying to use as evidence to say, we are going to have to make some changes here. We're just trying to make sure that we do appreciate both the risk profile and make sure that the story that we understood is the story that actually is reflected in the documents. And then as you get to closing, at that point, like you hopefully have a strong enough relationship that everybody is excited about the future. And the legal reflection of that is something that you can communicate around and make sure that, again, everyone understands the objective.
Okay, so we'll recap it to get to this final step. 1, fact-finding, relationship building, conversations. Step 2.
Well, actually, step 1 is discovery, right? The person has reached out.
Do we need to start over?
Initial conversation.
Well, David started with what prompts the conversation. Yes, there is a discovery or origination component to how we come to know about the opportunity, but we'll leave that off.
Maybe we're not going to number it.
I thought it was from call to close.
Yeah, we're not going to number it anymore. We're just going to go through it now. It is from first call to final close.
First call to final close.
That's the title now. Okay, so we have a conversation. We have the IOI. We have site visits, more conversations that leads to the LOI. We've now entered into an exclusive relationship. We go through the diligence process, which can vary in how long it takes. That diligence process is continuing to reinforce the business deal. The business deal then has to get translated into a legal document, which is the purchase agreement. Throughout diligence, we also learn all the things that have to happen in order to close this deal, which becomes the closing checklist. That all leads to the day of the closing. What'd you call it, Emily?
The finish and the starting line.
The finish and the starting line. Champagne is had, pictures are taken.
Millions of dollars are transmitted magically through the air.
And dreams come true.
And hopefully no one notices.
Why? What do you mean by that?
We know a process has gone well when the deal closes, and for the people involved in the business, the stakeholders, the customers, the employees, the suppliers, they don't notice that anything happened. And if that is true, then the whole process has done what it was supposed to do.
Our mini season on diligence continues in the next episode, where Emily and Taylor are going to talk us through how to build your diligence team, all the way from people already on your team to people you need to hire to help you navigate the process through diligence into closing and beyond. You can go to permanentequity.com/diligence, and you can find this entire project built out over a series of a few pages. permanentequity.com/diligence. We also have a PDF download. Once again, that's permanentequity.com/diligence.